What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video, and this week we're going to be taking a look at a deck that we had seen in the past and has kind of evolved and kind of follows the trend that Modern likes to follow of these established decks finding ways to continue to morph into something completely different to better tackle the meta game, and this one doing it and putting it on full display at the Apex Gaming RCQ that took place over the weekend and really showed us how powerful just a few tweaks to a deck that has already been established in the metagame can be. So today we're going to be taking a look at Jeskai Breach, and that title is going to be slightly misleading for the fact that it's not like the Jeskai Breach decks before it. So I'll explain more once we go ahead and take a look at the deck. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump over to that screen right now. So here we have what's called generic Ragavan. It's on Goldfish labeled that way. It's Jeskai Breach, essentially without the Grinding Station, Thassa's Oracle, Mox Amber combo. So what exactly makes this Jeskai Breach deck different from the other Jeskai Breach decks, and probably what people know the Jeskai Breach deck for? So as I just stated, you're usually playing like Thassa's Oracle, Emery's, Grinding Stations, Mox Ambers, and things like that to essentially mill your whole deck and then cast a Thassa's Oracle from your graveyard, winning the game because your devotion is greater than the number of cards in your library, or equal to the number of cards in your library as well. This deck in particular is essentially cutting all that. It's cutting the breaches, the ambers, the emeries, and the Thassa's Oracle, and it's playing a full playset of Dragon Rage Channeler, Ragavan, and Ledger Shredder. So far, nothing different than modern, say, about 6 to 8 months ago, where everyone was jamming for Dragon Rage Channeler, for Ragavan, and then Ledger Shredder as it came out. But this deck in particular is interesting because there is no necessarily combo with Underworld Breach. You're not trying to work towards something unfair that, like, once this card resolves, it's going to essentially end the game on the spot. It's just playing as a value card. And it's weird because in every iteration of, Jeskai Breach, I think up to this point, the combo decks that you had in Pioneer, the combo decks that you had in Legacy, and even some of the other modern decks playing Underworld Breach, it was you play this card and then the game is going to end if your opponent cannot interact with your graveyard or with the Underworld Breach itself. This deck does not care necessarily about Underworld Breach. While it is playing the 4 full copies of it in the main board, it's using it as a value engine. Like you just get to fill your graveyard with Dragon Rage Channelers and Ledger Shredders just by casting your second spell. In the case of Ledger Shredder, playing the majority of your deck with Dragon Rage Channeler, and just getting to put tons and tons of cards in your graveyard. Playing an Underworld Breach, and I've seen some Breach decks at the Apex Gaming RCQ that took place over the weekend, where they just cast Bauble like 3 or 4 times, triggered Dragon Rage Channelers, triggered their Ledger Shredders, and just went to town and drew like, 5, 6, 7 cards in a turn. And while that doesn't seem very impactful, like obviously it's not winning the game like how a lot of these Breach decks normally do, it put them up to like 6, 7 cards versus their opponent who's sitting on like 1 or 2. Like, and with how cheap the interaction is for this deck, the fact that you could play this Underworld Breach on like turn 4, have 4 lands in play, and essentially it gets to leave two mana up, and then whatever Ragavan treasure tokens that you might have, you just get to leave up a ton of interaction. Your opponent has a very hard time dealing with your threats because you still have just more Underworld Breaches that you can play, to where you can just recast Channeler, Ragavan, Ledger Shredder from your graveyard. And on top of all that, like, the creatures themselves don't need to deal a lot of damage because the mana bases in Modern are pretty painful, if you're playing a very complex mana base. So you could just get in like a few hits with like a Ragavan, a few hits with a Dragon Rage Channeler, or like even a Ledger Shredder only has like 1 or 2 counters on it. And then a late game Breach just casts Lightning Bolt 4 or 5 times and ends the game on the spot. I mean, it's crazy the different iterations that this deck can go through, where like it can just kill you with its creatures. It can just drown you in card advantage to where it eventually kills you with whatever creatures it has. can lock you out of the game of at least interacting with it, which is very time raveler, and just completely shutting down like the Cascade decks. Prismatic Ending giving it a way to interact with like Titan and all these other like Aether Vial decks, or just even like creatures that are mildly annoying to deal with, you know, because of Prismatic Ending. You have Unholy Heat, which is probably the best one mana like removal spell essentially in the format right now with the amount of things that it deals with, or even without having Delirium. Delirium just makes it insane. Expressive Iteration, probably easily hands down the best cantrip that's been printed, and probably close to ever. Just with the context of how the format is and everything. I mean, it's banned in Pioneer. Along with the fact that this card price should just be banned in Modern anyway. But probably the best cantrip that's available in the format, the best free spell that's available in the format, all kind of capped off with you know not even having to play like a counter spell, just spell pierce is good enough as interaction. Getting to play consider to fill your graveyard with spells that you want in it, or to even just put physical number like physical cards just to have the high count in there to either finish the game off with lightning bolts, to cast Mishra's Bauble 3, 4, 5 times in a turn. Getting to combo that with Dragon Rage Channeler to put even more cards in the graveyard, be able to maintain Delirium so that you're able to attack and kill your opponent with it. It's just this deck is a well-oiled machine and is a textbook case of decks in Modern finding ways to innovate, and then when they innovate, they just absolutely just blow away expectations. I think people, you know, expect Underworld Breach to be a world ender. Like once you play it, the game is over. And for this deck, it's even better because when you play it, the game isn't technically over, but a good player that can leverage the resources available to them when they cast an Underworld Breach and finding the right time to cast an Underworld Breach, and being able to recognize like, okay, this breach is going to cast Mishra Bauble 4 or 5 times, or it's going to cast an Expressive Iteration, and then maybe a Bauble or cast a Consider or something like that, just to get the card selection, the card advantage, or even you know the amount of removal spells that's able to play to deal with like the opponent's board, to deal with what your opponent's doing, and then putting it on them to find a way to answer you now, because at any other point we're just playing the game, we could just put more cards in our graveyard, cast a second breach, and that breach could end the game. Again, in the literal sense of just casting lightning bolt a bunch of times, or just playing out more threats and having our opponent say, okay, I have to deal with 3 Dragon Rage Channelers and 2 Ledger Shredders that are going to come through, and they're probably going to kill me on that swing. If not, put me very close and make me walk the razor's edge to try and come back and win the game. So definitely, if you're looking towards like playing a blue-red X deck in the format, Jeskai Breach is totally the deck that I would probably pick to play. And even just going the comboless route of it, after seeing it in play and everything, and watching people actually work through it, this deck it basically checks all the boxes of being a like feel smart deck. It is a deck that is satisfying to play, on top of again just making you feel like you're an absolute genius for piloting it, and the minute things that you can do, the different sequencings, the ways to like maximize the amount of value that you get from every Underworld Breach that you play, on top of just never even needing the Underworld Breach to actually win games of Magic, is insane. And decks rarely, can achieve that level of like success. And at least building into this deck, if Breach gets banned, but like Ragavan gets to stick around, then you have a lot of the cards that you need for like Blue Red Murktide, which is still one of the top played decks in the format, on top of like all the other Ragavan decks that you have in the format. So really, this deck I think is pretty safe to build into, essentially for the fact that like if Breach gets banned, the other 56 cards in the deck are all playable, and going even as far as like the other 71 cards throughout the whole deck are super playable and fit into other decks and give you basically the most expensive pieces for other decks already in your possession to then go build into something else. So yeah, that's gonna do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please be sure to, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. of course, go into the description of this video. You'll see a few links. One of them going to the my Twitch channel. I would appreciate if you go over, throw me a follow, so when I do go live and stuff over on Twitch, you get that notification, as well as following the link to the Discord server so we can talk about Magic and fun stuff like that. Because that's something I like doing. That's why I have a whole YouTube channel based on talking about Modern and Pioneer, because I absolutely love the formats. So yeah, that's gonna do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.